Each afternoon at precisely 3:10 p.m., the westbound platform at Ashton Central filled with golden light. The trains were unpredictable, but the sun never failed. On the edge of bench 9, just beneath a sputtering LED board, sat an older man with a stillness that made him seem part of the platform itself. His name was Major Elijah Ward. His coat bore the insignia of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and beneath the edge of his scarf, a faint outline of a purple heart could be seen. His boots were military issue, carefully shined, and beside him rested a cane fashioned from repurposed walnut, its handle carved with the initials, EW. Still, no one stopped. His presence seemed both commanding and invisible. Children ran past him toward vending machines. Businessmen tapped their phones, glancing at screens with practiced urgency. Teenagers clustered near the edge of the platform, laughing loudly, the sound mixing with screeching brakes and departure announcements. Elijah sat unmoving, his eyes fixed not on the tracks, but on a square of sunlight pooling just beyond the yellow line. The platform changed each day, faces, sounds, voices, but he remained the one constant, a fixture no one had asked for. Occasionally, pigeons would gather near his feet, pecking absently at crumbs from someone else's breakfast. He never fed them, never spoke. His gaze stayed soft, almost meditative. Once, a station manager tried to ask him if he needed assistance, but Elijah only nodded politely, then returned to watching the light. No travel ticket. No luggage. Just presence. Time passed him like a train that never stopped. There were days Elijah could not separate memory from presence. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead at Ashton Central sometimes blurred into the roar of rotor blades. The scent of burnt coffee from the kiosk curled into the acrid sting of spent gunpowder. And the scraping shuffle of a suitcase against concrete became the desperate drag of a wounded soldier's boots in wet clay. DAC 2, 1967, had never truly left him. He had been 24 when he was promoted to platoon leader, an age too young to carry the weight of so many decisions, too old to claim ignorance. His men were a mix of conscripts and volunteers, most barely out of school, some with mustaches grown just in time to feel older than they were. Private Leonard Grant had been the youngest in the unit, a wiry farm boy from Kentucky who carried topographical maps in a zippered pouch near his chest. "If I get hit, at least let someone find the ridge line," he used to joke, though Elijah had always suspected he meant it less as a joke and more as a plea. The day the jungle lit up was November 12th. A reconnaissance mission gone sideways, radio interference, bad intel, and a firefight that started before they even saw the enemy's eyes. They had been pinned between thick bamboo and a sharp ravine, bullets stitching the air above their heads. Elijah's memory of the chaos was fragmented, the sulfur smell, a scream from someone he couldn't reach, mud that sucked at his knees like tar. Leonard had taken a hit in the thigh, arterial, bright red gushing over brown fatigues. There had been no cover, no support, and no orders coming through the comms. And so Elijah had lifted the boy, barely conscious, whispering something about teaching his son how to cast a line, and carried him up the incline with his weapon slung behind him and blood soaking through his shirt. The ridge was steep. He slipped. He swore. But he never let Leonard go. When he reached the medic team 2 clicks away, his arms gave out, and the last thing he remembered before blacking out was the look of shock on the corpsman's face. "You carried him the whole damn way," they'd said later. "Jesus, Major." He returned from Vietnam a changed man, like so many others. But the change wasn't only in his body, though his lungs never fully recovered from the Agent Orange exposure, and his knees ached like rusted hinges in the cold. It was deeper. A silence began inside him, one that no ceremony or medal could ever break. He'd been awarded commendations, presented with a Purple Heart, even asked to speak at a few high school assemblies. But he declined each invitation. His words no longer came easily. Miriam had understood without needing explanation. She met him at a welcome home reception held by her church. She was small, stern, and wore a blue ribbon in her hair that he would later associate with comfort. Their courtship had been quiet, letters exchanged, walks taken, hands held rather than words spoken. She taught elementary school for 30 years and spent each Sunday evening grading papers beside him while he read war history books in silence. They bought a modest home with a porch and a view of a weeping willow. When their only child, Abigail, died of scarlet fever at age 6, Miriam wept into his chest for weeks, and Elijah held her without ever asking why. He knew better than to ask. After that, their lives moved slower. More gentle routines. Fewer expectations. More time spent in gardens or reading aloud to one another in the evenings. His voice, always raspier now, would read her poems by Kipling and Dickinson. She especially loved Dickinson's "Hope is the Thing with Feathers." In her final year, Miriam's hands began to tremble. The diagnosis came like a whispered threat, ALS. The decline was swift. Elijah tried everything, reaching out to doctors, researching treatments, reading forums where strangers clung to hope, but nothing slowed the unraveling. Her voice, once melodic and calm, disappeared by degrees. In the last month, she took to writing him notes instead of speaking. She wrote one each day and folded it neatly, placing it beside the breakfast toast he made for her. He kept every note. But the last one he kept folded in his coat pocket, next to his chest, just above the faint ache that never seemed to leave him. "I'll wait for you by the light," she'd written. That was all. 7 words in the curling hand he knew by heart. After she passed, he tried to remain in the house for a while. But the silence inside it was unbearable, no rustle of paper, no murmured reading, no gentle clink of her stirring tea. He moved to a smaller apartment near Ashton Central. Every day since, he had made the walk to the platform at 3:10 p.m. He didn't know why at first. But over time, he came to see the sunlit square where the afternoon light broke through as something sacred. The way the beams angled through the rafters reminded him of the way light had broken through the trees the day he carried Leonard Grant. Miriam had always loved the way light filtered through leaves, saying it was nature's stained glass. He began to believe, foolish or not, that maybe Miriam waited for him there, not in some afterlife he wasn't sure he believed in, but in that square of golden stillness. So he sat each day on bench 9, letter in pocket, boots shined, coat buttoned, just as if reporting for duty. Other veterans had tried to reach him over the years, old war buddies sending Christmas cards, invitations to reunions, emails forwarded through old VA channels. He never replied. There was no resentment. He simply didn't know how to bridge that gap anymore. The war had taken too much, and what it left behind, he had locked in the quiet corners of himself. But something was shifting. In recent weeks, the pigeons had stopped flocking. The children no longer ran by without glancing at him. And once or twice, someone had paused, just slightly, before continuing on. He didn't know why. Maybe the wind had changed. Or maybe, in a world that moved faster each day, the act of stillness was finally starting to feel like something rare. Ashton Central never slowed. The trains arrived and departed with screeching impatience, and the crowd flowed endlessly across the marble floors. But for all the commotion, there was a peculiar silence surrounding bench 9. The man who sat there each afternoon, boots polished, coat worn, posture unbending, was invisible in a way only veterans and ghosts could be. Major Elijah Ward did not belong to this era, and most people preferred not to see what didn't fit. He'd once been the center of a platoon, the voice people followed in chaos. Now, his voice was brittle, laced with a hoarse rasp that left sentences half-formed. A result of inhaling too much Agent Orange residue in the jungle, the doctors had said. He rarely used it now. The world didn't listen, and he had nothing new to say. What Elijah carried wasn't for explaining. But the world around him had no time for such considerations. A businesswoman in a navy blazer sat beside him once, tapping furiously at her phone. When he coughed, a dry, uncontrollable spasm, she stood abruptly, muttered "Jesus," and walked off without looking back. Moments later, a janitor glanced at him, then wiped down the spot where she had sat. A teenager filming himself for social media danced a few feet away, performing for an unseen audience. He noticed Elijah's coat, the patches, and shouted, "Hey Gramps. Halloween's not for 6 months." His followers laughed. Elijah could hear the playback echo. The boy offered a mocking salute, then skated off. Elijah didn't flinch. Some tried to help, in awkward, half-hearted ways. A barista approached with a tray of sample cups. "Would you like a ginger nutmeg latte?" she asked brightly. But her smile faltered when he took a second too long to answer. She pulled the tray back with an uneasy laugh and walked away, cheeks red. Once, a security officer asked him to move. "Just making sure no one's camping out here," he said, not unkindly. Elijah looked up. "I'm not camping," he said. "I'm remembering." The officer, young and uncertain, gave a stiff nod and retreated. The injustices were never dramatic. They were quiet. Persistent. The assumption that he had nowhere else to go. That his presence was discomforting. That his silence meant confusion, or weakness. That a man sitting in uniform without speaking must be broken, or forgotten, or both. But Elijah noticed everything. He noticed how people clutched their purses tighter when they passed. He noticed the pitying looks from some, the dismissive glances from others. He noticed how no one ever asked his name, or why he came to the same place every day, rain or shine, always at 3:10. He noticed the way some parents pulled their children away when they paused to stare at his medals. And he noticed how none of it surprised him. When his wife, Miriam, was alive, she would have called it erosion. "Not every injustice is a punch," she once told him. "Some are like the tide, you don't see it right away, but it pulls pieces of you off, bit by bit." He hadn't fully understood it then. He did now. Still, Elijah returned. Each day. Same time. Same bench. There were small moments of reprieve. One afternoon, a child broke from his mother's hand, walked up to Elijah, and asked, "Are you a real soldier?" Elijah smiled, faint and slow. "Used to be." The mother apologized, flustered, and pulled the boy away. But before he left, the child turned and gave a tiny salute. Elijah returned it, hand trembling slightly. Another time, a scarf vendor from the commuter bazaar approached with a wool scarf in muted blue. She offered it without speaking. He declined with a polite shake of his head, tapping the one already around his neck. "Miriam's scarf." The vendor nodded in understanding and walked away. The scarf stayed with her, but her respect remained. More often than not, though, the moments passed like trains, fast, loud, and unfeeling. He watched one man, in a crisp coat and expensive shoes, drop his wallet while boarding. Elijah rose slowly, stooped with effort, and retrieved it. He approached the man, extended it. "Sir," he rasped. The man turned, took it, mumbled, "Thanks," and turned away without a glance. Another day, a woman sat beside him for 3 full minutes before standing abruptly and moving down the bench. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her actions were fluent in the universal language of avoidance. Elijah had spent decades navigating jungle paths laced with tripwires and concealed enemies. Now, the threats were subtle and social, and harder to name. The isolation crept in, not as fear, but as weight. The weight of being constantly dismissed. But he stayed. He stayed because the light came through the station roof at 3:10 and landed in a perfect square on the concrete, illuminating the same space where he imagined Miriam waiting. He stayed because, even in the silence, he could still feel purpose. It might not be noticed, but it was real. Each day, he sat straighter than most. Each day, he polished his boots and buttoned his coat. Each day, he held his cane in the same hand, balanced the same way. He never slouched. He never complained. He simply existed with dignity in a world that mistook quiet for weakness and patience for irrelevance. The world might forget. But Elijah remembered. And in doing so, he endured. That Thursday, the wind was sharp, slicing through coats and scarves, making everyone walk faster. Elijah had arrived at Ashton Central early. His watch, a gift from Miriam on their 10th anniversary, was 5 minutes slow, but he adjusted his routine to match it. The sunlight hadn't yet reached its mark on the platform floor, but he sat waiting, boots squared, hands folded on the carved handle of his cane. The letter from Miriam rested lightly in his inside pocket, as always. As the hour approached 3:10, he watched the usual ebb and flow of strangers. Commuters with their earbuds in. Children trailing after distracted parents. A man talking angrily into a headset. A woman dragging a wheeled suitcase that kept tipping sideways. Life pulsed through the platform with indifference. Bench 9 remained a quiet island in the noise. Then, something changed. Footsteps echoed, measured, deliberate, not hurried. They came from the far end of the platform, not the main entrance. At first, Elijah thought it was another officer or maybe a transit employee. But there was a distinct rhythm to the walk. Not casual. Not arrogant. Military. He looked up. The man approaching wore a dark coat over a sharp green uniform, the creases still fresh. His boots were new but well-worn at the toe, polished with care. On his left breast, pinned above his name tag, Grant, was a single Army Commendation Medal and a silver bar denoting his rank, 2nd Lieutenant. Elijah's breath caught. Something in the boy's face. Young, of course, but familiar, strong chin, clear eyes, and the kind of solemn steadiness rare in someone so recently graduated from ROTC. The young officer came to a stop 2 paces in front of him and saluted. No hesitation. Not the tentative, performative gesture Elijah had seen at parades or on holidays. This was textbook. Full extension. Clean return. Elijah didn't move at first. The last time someone had saluted him was decades ago, maybe at Miriam's funeral, when an honor guard had folded the flag with aching precision. He blinked once, slowly, and studied the young man's eyes. Not just respectful, purposeful. There was a reason behind this visit. Major Elijah Ward, sir, the young man asked. Elijah nodded, once. Yes. The young officer's jaw clenched slightly. His voice didn't waver. Sir, my name is 2nd Lieutenant Marcus Grant. You carried my grandfather, Private Leonard Grant, off Hill 875 during the Battle of Dactu. November 1967. Elijah's head tilted. A memory stirred, a wiry kid from Kentucky, eyes too wide for the battlefield. Leonard, he murmured. Maps in his chest pocket. Said he'd teach his boy to fish. Yes, sir, Marcus replied. That boy is my father. He taught me how to cast a line before I could tie my own shoes. He told me about you. Told me a man saved his life, then disappeared. Never got to thank him. He's still alive. But he never forgot. Elijah's lips parted. He didn't know what to say. The platform around them quieted. Not completely, but enough. A custodian paused in his sweeping. A teen lowered his phone. People began to notice, not with pity, not with confusion, but with curiosity. Something was happening. Elijah pushed himself up with the cane. His knees protested, but he rose. And slowly, without ceremony, without flair, he returned the salute. Marcus dropped his hand, stepping forward. We've been looking for you, he said. My dad joined all the veterans networks he could. Forums, reunions, even put your name on a few genealogy sites. Said you saved more than one life that day. Elijah shook his head. I just carried him, he said softly. That's all it took. The train announcement overhead echoed with its usual chime, but no one moved to board. For a moment, Elijah and Marcus were the center of the station. Not by intention. Just by gravity. I didn't expect, Elijah began, then stopped. His voice cracked on the words. I didn't expect anyone to remember. Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a small, folded envelope. He asked me to give you this. He handed it over carefully. The handwriting was shaky but legible. On the outside, to the man who saved me. Elijah accepted it with both hands. Thank you, sir, Marcus said. Not just for my grandfather. For everything. You kept going. When others couldn't. That matters. The weight of the letter in his hand made Elijah feel like he was back on the ridge. Blood soaking his uniform. The heat, the smoke, the scream of artillery. But instead of guilt or pain, he felt something else, connection. Recognition, yes, but also a sense of continuity. That the boy he had once saved had grown up and passed the story forward. Why now? Elijah asked. Marcus gestured to the empty bench. He read a post online. Veterans Forum. Someone mentioned an older man at Ashton Central. Same time every day. Military coat. Purple heart. It wasn't hard to guess. Elijah managed a smile, thin but real. Marcus sat beside him without needing permission. They didn't speak for a few moments. The sun began to slant through the rafters, filling the platform with golden light. The square on the concrete glowed brighter. Elijah didn't need to check his watch. It was 3:10. People started to move again. But the moment lingered. A woman pushing a stroller slowed near them. A man in a suit nodded politely as he passed. The station manager peeked out from his booth, eyebrows raised, but said nothing. Even the barista from earlier walked by and, recognizing Marcus's uniform, offered a tentative thumbs up. Elijah let out a long breath. His hands were steady. The tremor gone, for now. You'll stay a while, he asked. Yes, sir, Marcus said. No hesitation. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the platform. For once, Elijah wasn't alone. Second Lieutenant Marcus Grant sat beside him, upright and patient, as if trained for the moment. And in a way, he had been, by stories passed down, by reverence shaped not by textbooks or boot camp, but by a living legacy. They sat without talking for a while. Not out of awkwardness, but mutual understanding. The kind found only between soldiers, no matter how many decades apart they'd served. A small crowd formed, not intentionally, but in pieces. A janitor leaned on his mop a few yards away, not sweeping. A cafe worker, Rena, the one who once offered the latte, stood near the kiosk, her tray momentarily forgotten. Two teenagers, the kind who might have once mocked Elijah, whispered to each other and watched without laughter. The station quieted. Marcus finally broke the silence. He used to say you carried more than his body off that hill. He said you carried his belief that some men still do what's right, even when no one's watching. Elijah exhaled slowly. He was bleeding out. I didn't think. I just moved. Marcus nodded. That's what makes it mean more. Elijah shifted slightly, bones stiff. He pulled the envelope from his coat pocket, the one Marcus had given him from Leonard. With careful fingers, he opened it. Inside, a letter written in tight cursive. Major Ward. You saved me. That day, and every day since. You didn't just carry me, you gave me back my life. I lived it because of you. I married. Raised a son. Built a small boat with my hands. Watched my grandson graduate as an officer. I never got to thank you. I'm doing it now. Your courage gave us everything. Forever grateful. Leonard Grant. Elijah blinked. The words blurred. He folded the letter with deliberate care and returned it to his coat, beside Miriam's. Then he looked at Marcus. He was always afraid he'd never get the chance to teach someone to fish. He did, Marcus said. He taught my dad. Then Dad taught me. A pause. Then Elijah gave a small nod. Good. Suddenly, the cafe worker stepped forward. Rena. She held 2 cups. Excuse me, sir, she said to Elijah, hesitating slightly. This one's on me. Just tea. Nothing fancy. Elijah looked up, surprised. She offered it with both hands. Thank you, he said, voice quiet but steady. A little girl standing nearby with her mother tugged away and approached. She held something behind her back, then shyly extended it, a drawing of the American flag, colored in crayon. It's for you, she said. My brother's in the army. Mommy says soldiers are brave. Elijah accepted it gently. So are little sisters, he replied. The mother stepped forward. We've seen you here, she said. I didn't realize, she stopped, then simply added, thank you. A man in a transit vest approached. Major, he said, clearly nervous. We'd like to help you board the next train first, if that's all right. No charge. I'm not going anywhere, Elijah said reflexively. But Marcus stood. He is today. Elijah looked at him. I've arranged everything, Marcus said. A short ride, just west. There's a new community center. Veterans meet weekly. Some you might know. Others will want to. I don't, Elijah began, unsure. You don't have to speak. You just have to show up, Marcus said. Rena stepped in again. It'd be an honor to see you off, sir. Slowly, the air shifted. Not with applause. Not with spectacle. But something more powerful, acknowledgement. A presence. A return. A transit manager came forward and offered his arm. Elijah hesitated. Then, for the first time in years, he accepted. Marcus took his other side. Together, they helped him rise. People stepped aside. They didn't know the whole story. They didn't need to. Something about the moment commanded quiet. They passed through the platform like parting water. No fanfare. Just space, respectful, instinctive. Not just for Elijah, but for what he represented. A memory too long ignored. A man too long unseen. As they reached the boarding door, the conductor nodded. Seats are open. First 2 on the left. Take your time. Elijah turned back for one last look at bench 9. The golden light was still there, glowing across the concrete. His square of sun. He touched his coat pocket, Miriam's letter. Then turned to Marcus. She said she'd wait by the light, he murmured. Marcus offered a quiet, she did. They boarded. The train pulled away from Ashton Central with a low, rolling hum, its windows glinting gold in the falling light. Inside, Elijah Ward sat by the window, upright, his cane resting across his knees. Across from him sat Second Lieutenant Marcus Grant, hands folded neatly in his lap, as if on parade. Neither spoke for the first several minutes. The silence wasn't awkward. It was complete. The seats near them remained empty. Other passengers, sensing something different about the 2 men, something solemn, something almost sacred, chose to sit farther down the car. Not out of discomfort. Out of respect. Elijah watched the scenery blur by. Trees gave way to warehouses, which melted into residential rooftops and schoolyards and, eventually, empty stretches of field brushed with wheat and wind. The rhythm of the ride lulled him, not into sleep, but into memory. "I never thought I'd ride one again," he said finally. Marcus looked up. "A train. Miriam and I used to take the line west every autumn. Watch the leaves change. Bring a thermos of cider. Sometimes she'd read aloud." He smiled faintly. "Dickinson. Always Dickinson." Marcus nodded. "Hope is the thing with feathers." Elijah's smile deepened, just slightly. "She made me believe that." The train hissed around a bend. Ahead, the small rural town of Walden Springs came into view. A modest sign, a quiet platform, and a cluster of brick buildings behind it. As they approached, Marcus shifted slightly. "They've prepared something," he said. "Nothing formal. Just people. Veterans. Locals. The mayor, I think. A few school kids." "I don't want a speech," Elijah said. "There won't be one. I don't want my name on a plaque." "There won't be that either." "Then why?" Marcus paused. "Because presence matters. Because people need to see who you are, not just what you were. Because silence isn't the same as absence." Elijah said nothing, but the words settled in him like warm ash. The train slowed. Elijah straightened his coat. Marcus offered his arm again, and Elijah accepted it without hesitation this time. Together, they stepped down from the train. A small group waited. 10, maybe 12 people, old veterans in caps and jackets decorated with pins, a trio of children holding handmade flags, a woman with a clipboard and a mayoral pin who smiled but did not step forward, a young man with a guitar slung over his back. No banner. No podium. Just people. Real ones. They stood still as Elijah and Marcus approached, not cheering, not clapping. Just waiting. The oldest of the veterans stepped forward, removing his cap. "Major Ward," he said, voice cracking. "I served in Nam too. You carried one of ours out. That makes you one of ours." Elijah's throat tightened. "I only did what I could." "That's all any of us could do," the man replied. A small boy, no more than 7, held out a folded piece of paper. "My daddy's in the Navy," he said. "I drew you this." It was a stick figure saluting a much larger stick figure with a cane. Above them, written in bold red crayon, "Thank you, hero." Elijah took it with trembling fingers. "What's your name?" "Eli." Elijah's breath caught. "That's a good name." The mayor stepped forward, clipboard tucked under one arm. "No speeches," she said. "Just a thank you and a ride to the center if you're willing." Elijah looked to Marcus. "What's the center?" "A place for stories. For remembering. For connecting. For silence, too, if that's what you need." He nodded. "I might." Together, they walked to a waiting van. On the side, painted in quiet navy blue, Walden Springs Veterans Outreach and Resource Center. A volunteer held the door open. Inside, the walls were decorated not with war photos, but with images of families, veterans with grandchildren, fishing trips, barbecues, backyard gardens. There was no front desk. No intake forms. Just a lounge, a reading room, and a bulletin board covered in handwritten notes, some dated, some not. "Sit anywhere," the volunteer said. Elijah moved to a worn armchair in the corner. A bookshelf stood nearby, filled with old paperbacks. Marcus sat across from him, removing his cap. A few minutes passed in peace. Then, one of the older vets from the train station entered, carrying a thermos. "Coffee's not bad," he said. "But the stories are better." Elijah looked around. "No uniforms here." Just faces. Men and women of all ages. One woman was crocheting. A young man read a comic book. An older couple were playing cards in the corner. "I don't talk much," Elijah said. "That's all right," the man said, pouring him coffee. "We're not here to make anyone talk. We're just here." Later, as dusk crept into the windows, Marcus found Elijah sitting in front of the bulletin board. He was reading the notes. One read, "Still miss my brothers every day." Another, "If you're reading this, you're not alone." Elijah reached into his coat and unfolded Miriam's letter. Carefully, he pinned it to the corner of the board. Below it, he wrote just 3 words on a new card: "She kept waiting." Marcus didn't ask. He didn't need to. Outside, the town settled into evening. Porch lights flicked on. A dog barked in the distance. A pair of teenagers biked past the window, their laughter fading into the air. Inside the center, the coffee stayed warm. The seats stayed full. The stories stayed shared, or simply held in silence. Elijah sat by the window, watching as the final light of day folded into soft gray. For the first time in years, he didn't count the seconds. He didn't measure the minutes until he'd returned to the bench. Because he knew, somehow, the bench would always be there, but so would this. This place. These people. This memory made living again. Still standing.